Hello, my name is Wildstag, and thank you for tuning in to another used book rant. Today, I'm going to be discussing this book, Priest. This is book one in the Ratcatchers series, written by Matt Colville. Matt Colville, who is also a YouTuber, a tabletop role-playing game based content creator. He's been advertising his books on basically every video for the first few years of his channel, and I knew about those books, but I never was really interested in picking any of them up. Then, in December of 2023, when I was visiting home for my birthday, I went to McKay Used Books in Manassas, Virginia. And I was looking through the shelves and I found copies of some of the books I wanted. And one of the things that irritated me about McKay Books was that the shelves were not organized in ways you would think they were. I was looking for the book series with that San Francisco based like magic using investigator. I want to say Dog Days was one of the titles in that series. And I found books 2, 3, and 4. And then on another shelf, I found books 2, 3, and 4. And then on another shelf in another section, I kept on finding more and more copies of these books. And it was the same for other series. It was just some of the books were in the same section based on author's last name, but they were scattered all over the place, so there wasn't really a rhyme or reason. Like, they were averse to having multiple copies of the same book on the same shelf, as if, I don't know, they wanted to make it seem like they had more books than they do. And, my surprise when I see a name I recognize, and then I pull it up out of the shelves, and I guess I'd never looked at the covers for his books, but I am partial to anything with a stag's head on it, a stag's skull, and my ex made a comment about it like, "You're gonna buy that, aren't you?" And it's like, not for the reasons you're thinking. I'm picking it up off the shelf because I've watched that YouTuber's videos all the time, and it's one of the books he's been advertising for a long time. And then she made a joke about that. Technically, the book is $5 if you buy it on Kindle, $15 if you buy it on paperback. This copy was $8.49, which is more than 50% of the listed paperback price. So it was a bit weird. I probably paid more for it than I otherwise could have if I had found it at another used bookstore, but even finding this one was kind of a surprise to me. This one in the back says Made in the USA, Lexington, Kentucky, 29th of April, 2018. And the front says, "Special thanks, the inestimable Tim Denis for the brilliant cover, Natalie for everything." And the book is fairly long for a fantasy novel. I'm usually not a fan of longer books that are like 500 pages in their book one, but I figured I'd try it out anyway, and I liked it. Now, what's kind of funny is that the receipts are in the back, shows that I paid like $59.43 for a collection of books that day. I haven't read all of them that I purchased that day, but I have read most of them. To get into the meat of the actual video, I really liked the main character. Matt Colville's talked about it before, but he really likes the idea of a sin eater, things that may line up more with gray morality than black and white morality. And this person does it so that other people don't have to. That this person in Matt Colville's games and in his stories, Ratcatchers tends to be another word for adventurers or mercenaries, sellswords. Ratcatchers are the sort that go into someone's cellar, hunt some rodents of large size and then come out, and they eventually move on to bigger and bigger things. Hayden, spelled Heden, is one of those that was exceptionally well known at one point in time. He was a famous adventurer and had a lot of wealth and was able to eventually retire, but kind of retired in shame. He had some bad blood or some bad history in his last couple missions. In his service in this book, he is explicitly a priest of the god that the humans worship in this setting. I don't think he mentions other non-human species. I don't recall whether it was stated that those worship other deities, but each of the priests venerate particular saints within this deity's religion. And the one that Hayden worships, he seems to be ashamed to mention, or if he does mention it, no one recognizes her name. And one of the things that I think is really impressive about Matt Colville's writing is that he is this person who Hayden carries a lot of shame and a lot of regret in his heart, but that doesn't stop him from doing his job. And that regret is partly what plays into his role within the church and within the story. That the saint that he venerates is one of forgiveness, one that had a life of sin, but eventually sought forgiveness and died, became a saint, but generally only has one or two worshippers, that she is incredibly uncommonly known, that among those that do know of her, very few ever venerate her. It's never explicitly stated that there's only ever one worshiper of her, one person that venerates her ideals, but that one person kind of with disdain in his tone says only one person ever truly worships her, and it's implied it's out of lust for what she was in her own life before becoming a saint. And Hayden kind of has a defensive tone about him, a chip on his shoulder. He is someone who trusts in people who gain power through their own abilities and seems to have some disdain for people who gain power, societal power through station in life. He doesn't like knights. He doesn't like lords. He distrusts most people who are born into power and wealth. And that plays a part in this story because he is sent to investigate an order of knights that has recently had some situation causing them to eventually lose favor with the saint that imbues them with their power. And these are green knights in the sense of like the story of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. They are fey, mysterious, ancient, and they all have green hair and live exclusively in this forest, protecting humanity from the threats that live within and from beyond. That they are protectors, but they are also knights, and they do have their pride and flaws about them. And they have started to lose favor with their saint and are stubborn about revealing the actual circumstances that led to it. So Hayden, as this kind of sin eater character, is sent to investigate why they are losing favor and to try and intercede on their behalf to do a ritual that, if they are truly contrite, they can be forgiven and gain their power back. And he is gruff. He doesn't like knights. He has this chip on his shoulder, And so he's fighting an uphill, losing battle the entire time. On the other hand, it is clear that he cares about civilians. He cares about defending and protecting the innocent, the common folk of the land. He cares about protecting them, but he has a hard time opening up and having empathy for these knights. And that's really what drives the plot, and kind of what makes it last 500 some odd pages, is that he just keeps on kind of going in circles. Now, the last page of this book, there's like acknowledgments, alpha readers, beta readers, and then lastly, sine qua non. And it says, Hayden is the result of many influences, but first he came from a conversation with John Wick, the game designer, way back in 2003 about Sin Eaters. The next major influence was a piece on This American Life about a veteran returning home from Iraq, finding himself unable to function at home. Most of the heavy lifting on this book was done while listening to Where You Go, I Go Too by Lindstrom, for which I thank Brian Chan and his passion for introducing people to new music. So it really emphasizes what I've been saying throughout the video, is that the concept of Sin Eaters is a pretty big aspect of this story, and are something that Matt Colville talks about in his videos from time to time. He has this very unique interests, and it is those interests that he writes about. He is slow to write. I believe at one point in time he expressed that he was going to write a book 3 and book 4 and book 5 of this series, and that each one would represent one of the 4 archetypes of classic tabletop role-playing games: priest, thief, warrior, and mage. But his popularity with the YouTube channel took off, and his eventual third-party publishing of 5th edition D&D content picked up, and then eventually Draw Steel and MCDM and so on and so forth. He started having more on his plate, and the mindset that he was in that led to writing Priest and Thief are not, though that mindset is not as prevalent or as pressing a concern in his own life now. So it is unlikely that we are going to see continuations of these stories anytime soon, which is a bummer, because it feels like so many fantasy stories have this issue where something really good is written, but it's based on a particular mindset that eventually someone grows out of. And I don't know necessarily that there's a formula to make it so that people don't lose interest in that way, but I really wish that more could be made in the series. Priest is a really fun book. I paid $8.49 for it, and I think I'd be willing to pay more, or full price for it, or even just pay for more content. It's a really fun book. It's a tome for certain, but it is a really interesting story, and it had me constantly thinking. I never really caught up to the twist, never caught up to the story, to the actual main plot until Hayden did. And I think that's a mark of a really good writer. And I think of it like I was talking with a friend last week about the Bloody Rose rant from last week. In Orconomics, which I really love and is on the shelf behind me, Orconomics has this moment where I knew where the story was leading before we got to the realization that prompts the climax of the book. And same with Bloody Rose. When I was reading Bloody Rose, I knew that the revelation, now we are the ones that go bump in the night, was coming. But for Priest, I couldn't really predict it, because it seemed that there were so many other red herrings in play that when it finally was revealed, it made sense, but it wasn't. It was foreshadowed, but it wasn't overtly enough that you could necessarily get that twist. So, like I said, I really like this book, and I wish there was even more in this series. So, you know, if you like fantasy and especially the mystery side of fantasy novels, this is a really good book for you. And now it's going to live back up on that shelf behind me. So, yeah. My name is Wildstag, and thank you for tuning in to another used book rant.